So you need to identify your different threats. You need to understand your mission, and then you got to create the plan that's going to take. So if any of these things happen, you are going to be able to respond appropriately. Reality is, if I put the training and the foundations in place first, that's going to set me up for more success going on later on.
On this episode of A Call to Leadership, you get to hear from J.R. Spear, who is a dear friend and has a unique life experience. Former Marine, as you heard, blown up in Iraq. Extreme discipline, extreme focus. Can't wait for you to hear more from J.R. Spear. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is A Call to Leadership. J.R. Spear, so incredibly happy to have you on the show. We've been friends for so long, and we've spent a lot of time in the trenches together, business and family, and you've got such an incredible story to tell. Because of you've done so much in your life when it comes to both, running your organizations, working for others, being a superstar in whatever you do. And I'm just thrilled to be your friend. So this is an exciting time.
No, I'm honored to be on here and that you even asked me to be on your show. So this is awesome.
Yeah, man. Well, Call to Leadership is really about how we're all called to leadership. And ultimately, at different stages of our lives, we have different levels of leadership. And, you've not only inspired others, but I know you've been inspired as well. And I'd like to just start very simply with, you've been an entrepreneur for so many years and really just helping our audience to understand, where does that entrepreneurial spirit come from? I mean, in youth, were you a child of entrepreneurs? How did this kick off?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of know my backstory, but I grew up in a family-owned business, mainly in the martial arts and fitness space. So from a very young age, I was kind of exposed to teaching and leading and serving other people, which was honestly was just instilled in me from a very young age, and that's all I knew. So from 3 years old, I started in martial arts myself and the training and kind of get into that world. And then at 12 years old, I started teaching, and I would be like this young kid leading a whole group of adults inside of a room and be able to take control and command. And it was pretty cool. I didn't really notice it at the time, but I never really saw other peers my age being able to take command of a room full of adults from a young age. And that kind of led throughout my entire childhood. And I started teaching at that young age and just kind of all the way through until I graduated from high school. But even in high school, I was very fortunate enough that I had the opportunity to travel around to other different schools within the area of where I lived. And I would take over the entire class. So it'd be kids my age. Maybe I was like a sophomore and I would be taking over like a senior class or whatever like that. But I'm taking over the entire class for the day for that teacher. And I'm teaching these classes about self-defense, awareness, date rape, and all these different things that kind of fell into my realm and my expertise in what I did. So from a young age, I was definitely exposed to being in front of a group, leading the command, and being able to present and teach. And that's just something that came very natural to me.
Wow. So 12. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. So you're 12 years old and you're already now what rank were you at age 12?
I wasn't a black belt by then. I mean, in the old days when I started in martial arts, it was very different because it was very common for us to be one belt for like 2 or 3 years at a time. And so I didn't get my first degree black belt until I was about 14 years old. So I can't remember what belt I was at that time, but I could have been like a red or a brown belt. But nowadays, if you join in martial arts, what I like to call them is belt factories, is a lot of martial arts school owners, they in their defense, they're trying to make a living and they're doing from their expertise, and through stats, majority of the people that are going through martial arts don't last longer than 3 years. So that's why they call it black belt club program, and they almost can guarantee your belt in 3 years, whether you're good or bad. And it's sad and unfortunate, but that's kind of how the industry moved into. And so even though it took me more than 10, 12 years to get my first degree black belt, I'm definitely thankful for the leadership and the skill sets that I learned at such a very young age.
Wow. So who was running the school parents? Who's running it?
Yeah. So my mother was actually the one that owned the school herself. And so she started martial arts when she was 10 years old and kind of grew up into it. And that became her entire life. So I got 4 sisters, and all of us pretty much grew up in the martial arts school. And I remember telling my mom one day, I was like, kind of complaining from a very young age, like, "Hey, Mom, why don't I play other sports like other kids?" And she goes, "Well, you do play other sports." Now, granted, starting at 7 years old, I played football. And then once I got into the 5th grade, I started playing ice hockey and other things like that. But I never looked at martial arts as a sport, even though I traveled the country of the U.S. Competing and things like that on a regular basis. It was just, to me, it just seemed more like a lifestyle change or a lifestyle. And it didn't seem like a sport or an extracurricular activity because it was something that we just did. So me and my sisters, we would go to, we would get done with school. We'd go to the martial arts school and there until it's time to go to bed. And then we go home, go to sleep, wake up and do it again. And that was just our everyday life. We didn't really know anything different.
Dude, so you were basically like a kick butt family. Like if anybody ganged up on your family, you could just go to town if you wanted to, I would imagine.
Yeah, we all kind of knew our role and we all knew our play. And even though I grew up with my mom owning the martial arts school, I've been very fortunate to be exposed to a lot of other high-ranking martial arts masters and things like that, and from different styles and even different places across the country. So I was definitely mentored by a lot of other people rather than just my mother owning the school. So I come with a lot of different skill sets and mastery in different styles of martial arts too.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So you had this exposure to business, certainly an exposure to the martial arts. Of course, I had martial arts as well. So you obviously, you learn discipline, you learn confidence, learn self-control. Were you ever overconfident because of that exposure?
Yeah, from a young age, I look back now, and there was a period in time in high school where I would consider myself a bully. In a way, even though I taught people on not being a bully and things like that, and this is like I became a Christian when I was eight years old. When from one of my churches at South County Baptist Church in St. Louis, but there was definitely a rebel time in my life when I was a teenager, where I kind of slid back and was doing my own thing. But I rededicated my life when I was 17. And I'll never forget this moment that after I rededicated my life, I went to school and sitting in choir class, and the kid next to me, his name was Josh. And I looked at him and I would just greet him, just saying, "Hey, Josh, what's going on?" And just the look on his face of the way he responded to me, it was almost like this look of fear, like he was terrified of me. And before this, I never even noticed that even happened. I was like, "What the heck is going on?" And it just was a very natural thing. And I was like, "Whoa!" There was a complete shift in who I was. So talking about overly confident and stuff like that. I mean, yes, I really felt like that no one was going to be able to mess with me. I mean, I've been in a lot of fights when I was younger and just never really took a lot of, excuse my language, but a lot of crap from anyone, and just learn how to stick up for myself, for my sisters, and just felt like I can, dominate anything. And it was very, it was good at the self-defense stuff, but it wasn't until I was rededicated, accepted life, filled with the Holy Spirit, and accepted Christ as my Savior, that and kind of leading that path where it actually became light to me. And I was like, whoa, I was doing this for all the wrong thing, and then totally made a big transformation in my life.
Wow. Do you, because of that, I mean, do you have a more of a compassion for those that have been bullied now? Did that happen? I mean, when you're 17, there's a lot going on, right? There's the adolescent moving into adulthood, and you're between two people, and a lot of, hormones, everything else is going on. And I'm sure lots of testosterone, if I remember correctly. Yeah. It's a very confusing time, but at the same time, it sounds like you had this awakening, this revelation. I mean, did you begin to have more empathy for others through that? What was that type of? So
I always looked at, it's weird because I always looked at myself as the person that stuck up with the person being bullied. And at that time, I didn't realize that I was even being a bully myself to certain people, and just having a nasty attitude and just a lack of self-control, which is really weird because in martial arts, we learn about discipline and self-control. But I just kind of went off. There was just a very weird stage in my life from like 15 to 17 where I was just kind of not really focused, not disciplined, and just kind of doing my own stuff. But I mean, I definitely have a lot of empathy, and I just don't tolerate anyone being bullied. And even from a young age, I always protected those being bullied. So looking back at my years when I look and see how I was and how I could have been, looked at as a bully to other people, it almost makes me kind of disgusted with myself. And,
yeah,
but that's, we learn, we grow, and we kind of move on.
Yeah, I remember the scene in Captain America where the doctor's asking Steve Rogers, if he wants to go kill Nazis. He says, "No, I just don't like bullies."
Yeah,
and I think that's really pertinent. I think that probably resonates with you as well as somebody who's. I mean, when you're 15 to 17, certainly there's a lot of grace that we can afford one another because it's certainly a time of maturing. But the fact that you turn the corner because of your, you just rekindling your walk with God is really pretty cool. Now, so 17 years old, then what's next? Do you just say, I'm just going to open my own dojo and just be an entrepreneur, or are there other phases along the way?
Oh man, there's a lot of different phases, and and with my clients and what I do, I always teach them about different identities, and kind of through my life, I went through essentially almost 4 different identities in my life and what I went through. But before I rededicated my life to Christ, I went through a scenario where I was in trouble with the law quite a bit and owed a lot of different fines for tickets and different things that I needed to pay off because I got in trouble with a lot of different stuff, lost my license, couldn't drive. And my grandmother was a huge part of my upbringing in my life. And she came over to our house and I asked her, I was like, "Hey, Grandma, I really need to be able to pay off some of these fines so I can get my license back and start driving. Can you help me out and drive me around to other, pawn shops or whatever so I can sell some items?" So I was going through like my bedroom, was getting all these different things and was like a radio and TV and all this different stuff. I was like, okay, maybe I can, get something for this so I can pay off some money. And, cause I didn't really have a job at that time either. So my grandmother agreed to it. I put the stuff in her car. She was driving me around. And while we're driving, we're going down Limerick Boulevard in St. Louis, and she makes a turn into a plaza and pulls into a parking spot. And I look straight up and she looked at me and she says, "You're going to go in there and you're not coming out of here, and we're not leaving until you sign up for the military." And, that was eye-awakening to me. And I was so thankful for my grandma, and, she ended up passing away in 2017. But up until the day of her deathbed, she would always tell and brag to everyone about that situation, how she made me go to the military and be able to do it, kind of transform my life in there. And that was a huge transition in my life. And it's kind of funny because when I walked in there, it was, I would never go Army or Air Force for different reasons. So it was always either going to be Navy or it was going to be the Marine Corps. And at that time, being 16 and kind of the kid that I was, I knew I never wanted to go be a Marine because they just work too hard. They're too gung-ho, they're too motivated, and it just seemed really hard. So I was like, oh, you know what? I'll go in the Navy. They don't seem like they work that hard. So I went in and I ended up signing up for the Navy. Now, granted, I'm still a junior in high school at this time. So I couldn't go in right away, but they had something called the DEP program. So it was like a delayed entry program that you go in and you show up in these meetings on a monthly basis and you have to do different tasks and stuff like that. So I signed up for the DEP program and still had this period of time. So after I signed up, I ended up having this transformation and rededicating my life to Christ, and my whole life just completely changed. And I still wanted to move forward with going to the military, even though that's what I want to do, because I knew I didn't want to go back to school. And I mean, I barely showed up half my senior year as it was, and skipped majority of the time. I graduated with a 1.2 GPA from high school, and didn't even know that they were going to give me a diploma when I was walking across stage. So I truly believe that they gave me a diploma just because they knew I signed up for the military and they knew I needed something different in my life. And so I ended up signing up for the military, leaving at that time. And it was the best decision that I ever made. And I ended up following through and sticking with it and did really well for me. But the crazy thing is, even though I signed up for the Navy and didn't want to go to the Marine Corps, and I signed up with a completely different job. It was supposed to be an aviation boatswain handler. I don't even know what that job title is. It was just someone that was on a ship that did work. And but I never got to experience it, because when I went into boot camp and found this job called an RP, which stands for Religious Program Specialist. And as an RP, you're provided security for the chaplain. And here I'm very motivated. I'm excited about renewing my faith, and I'm just on fire for Christ, and just wanted to do whatever I can in missions and serve the kingdom and being a disciple of Christ. And I found out about this job as an RP, which is Religious Program Specialist, and your whole job is to provide security and administrative tasks for the chaplain, which a chaplain is essentially a pastor in the military, depending on what faith that they are. But chaplains are the only true non-combatants in the military, meaning they can't even carry a weapon for defense. Corpsmen, medical personnel, they're non-combatants as well, but they can still carry for defense. So because of that, chaplains needed to have someone like me as an RP to provide security for them. So I signed up I ended up getting we call it your rating in the Navy, which is your job. And in the Marine Corps, you call it your MOS. But I ended up changing my rating in boot camp to an RP. And God's sense of humor was here. I was trying to avoid the Marine Corps, and I ended up spending my entire time in the Marine Corps. So because the Marine Corps is the Department of the Navy, so they actually take people from the Navy to serve on the Marine Corps side, and it's going to be all your medical personnel and your chaplain corps that are all Navy personnel. And then we end up doing some, Marine combat training type stuff before we can actually go serve with the Marines. So that was kind of a funny sense of humor. Here, God used my grandmother to bring me to the recruiting station during a difficult time in my life. Here, I didn't want to go to the Marine Corps, and I didn't sign up for the Navy, but I ended up spending my whole time in the Marine Corps. But talking about identity, and I want to hit on that for a few minutes because we talk about the transition and stuff like that, and this will resonate with a lot of your audience on leadership and stuff like that. In life, and this advice I learned from a former Navy SEAL. He retired from the Navy SEAL. He'd done a lot of Homeland Security and some stuff with the agencies and stuff like that. And he says that there's two different types of identities. There's one that you choose and one that you earn. And I believe that they can actually coincide because you have to choose the identity that you want, but then you got to earn the influence to have that identity. So for like a Navy SEAL, if you want to be a Navy SEAL, you got to be mentally prepared saying, hey, I want to be a Navy SEAL. So that's a choice, but then you got to earn that identity. And different life, we go through different stages of your identity of what you can have. And for me personally, I had almost four, possibly five different stages of my identity where as a kid, I was known as Mr. Karate Kid. And everyone knew me as the martial arts guy, the Mr. Karate Kid. I mean, you know about the movies that came out, and that's who I was. And it becomes everything who you are. It's what people know you as, and it just becomes just everything about you. And then I go into the military, and no one knows me as Mr. Karate Kid. But I was very fortunate that while I was in the military and with my job as an RP, I actually trained a lot of Marines and sailors in the martial arts through their martial arts program and teaching and got to really, kind of move forward with that. But in the military, my identity was no longer being a Karate Kid. It ended up being RP. So everyone would call me RP3 Spear. The 3 is my rank as a petty officer, but RP Spear. And even today, I have friends that I still stay in contact with that I went to Iraq with and really developed strong relationships that even today, they still won't call me by my name, but they'll still call me RP. And it's just funny because that's how they identified me as. And that was they identify you by your last name, your title, and your rank and what you do. So that was that identity. And then kind of getting out of the military, and if you want me to talk about my experience in Iraq, I can go back to that. But
yeah, definitely. We'll come back to that. That's very powerful as well.
Yeah.
But you know what? Before you go into the next stage, I want to just double back.
Sure.
So I want to talk just a little bit more about Grandma. So tell me more about Grandma and her leadership and her influence in your life.
Yeah. So my mom, me personally, I grew up in a house with 4 sisters and my mother. My mom divorced my dad when I was 3 years old. And when my mom married my dad, they had 2 kids, so me and Holly. She divorced my dad at 3 when I was 3 years old. And then she got remarried to another gentleman and had 3 more kids with him. And then they ended up separating years later, I think after like 10 years. So growing up, majority of my teenage years and even going into adulthood, I was always just my mother and me and my 4 sisters. So I grew up in a house full of women. But my grandparents.
Where was your dad?
So my dad was always present. I mean, I saw him. I mean, he didn't really have any custody, but I saw him every other weekend. So he still lives in St. Louis. I grew up, born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and now I live in the DC area. But I had an okay relationship with him when I was younger. And then when I went in the military, our relationship definitely got stronger. And now we talk really frequently and have a stronger bond than what we did. So, but my grandmother and my grandmother and grandfather were both very present in our lives. And there was even a period of time where we ended up living with them. But she was over at our house. I mean, I would probably say I saw her almost every single day of my life growing up. And she was always around, very present in what we did, watched us, fed us, and just really involved in our upbringing. So with me and all.
Did she cook?
Oh my gosh, she was the best. So
Yeah.
the good old Southern cooking. So
Oh man, come on,
everything
brother.
that was fat.
Yes.
So like some
Yes.
famous recipes that I miss is her biscuits and gravy, and which she taught me how to make. So I make that now on the holidays, and of course.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, it's the best.
Hey, I'm going to be hitting you up for them now.
She has a little bit key secret recipe that goes inside of there that I use. So. Yeah, so I definitely follow her recipe, and that's something that me and my whole family miss, and we make it in remembrance of her all the time. So
yeah. So she certainly had an influence on you. I mean, tremendous influence, just to be able to drive you to the recruitment center and say, this is what you're doing. I mean, you had to have tremendous trust in her guidance, in her leadership.
You don't say no to grandma. I mean, whatever grandma says, you better do. And I just, I had the utmost respect for her. I mean, from day one, I mean, she was the influence and huge part of me growing up. So, I definitely respected what she said and wanted to follow. And it was at that time that while we're sitting in front of the recruiting office, she I don't remember the whole conversation, but it came down to, it was like, okay, well, what are you going to do with your life? If I wasn't going to go to college, so what I was going to either get a dead end job or, end up in prison because of the crowd that I was hanging around and just kind of being stupid, or go in the military and try to make something of my life. And my grandfather was retired Navy after 22 years. My uncle was former Marine. So he spent, I think, like 4 years in the Marine Corps. My dad spent some time in the Army. So, for me, it was like, that was my only way out and what I what to do, or else who knows where I would end up if I didn't go.
Well, and I think that tremendous vision casting and just that sense of urgency that your grandmother had was, that was life giving and life changing for you. And I think, for all the grandmas listening, you are important, right? I mean, you are valuable, and such great wisdom and discernment in her ability to help you along your journey. I don't think we can discount that at all. I think that's so precious, and it's important to recognize, because we need people like that in our lives, especially when we're young, that see where we were, but see the potential in us. And she certainly saw the potential in you to be able to not only grow there, but I think also be a benefit to our country, right? I mean, I'm so thankful for your service. And service for all service people. So you get to the Marines, and then everything is smooth sailing, right? You do your time and you're done.
Yeah, no, I mean,
not the case.
Yeah, you would think so, but no, definitely not. And for me going in, my first duty station was at Quantico, Virginia, which is supposed to be a non-deployable unit, which it is a non-deployable unit, but I was supposed to be there for my entire contract of 4 years. And I went in with every intention of making a career out of the military and spending, the 20 years. And I look back now, it's like, man, if I would have stayed, I'll be able to retire like within the next year. And, but God had a different plan for me, and I ended up getting out. So, for me personally, when I went into the military, I didn't really have a significant other in my life at that time. This is back in 2003 when I went in. I got to Quantico in 2004 after boot camp and all my training. And I was very gung ho, very motivated, super in the best shape of my life. And I mean, I could outrun being this Navy guy. To get the respect of the Marines, it's like you got to perform better than the Marines if you want to gain any of their respect. So I always did my best to try to outperform them, out PT them, outshoot them on the ranges, everything that I could to do it. And really, really focused on, being better or just as good as any of them, and just kind of making sure that I can keep up with what they were doing and what their mission was. Because of that. So when you go into the military and stuff like that, not everyone, I can't speak for everyone, but for me personally, and just kind of like the motivation and who I was as a person, I just hated sitting on the sidelines. It's like during this time we were in, the U.S. were at war, and we're still at war a little bit. But we were at war with Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff. And here we gone through all the training, and yet I'm just sitting on the sidelines, like being on a pro football player, and you train and train and train, and you go to the game, and let's just say, it's the last game of the season, and you don't even get to get on the field to play. And for me, I felt like I needed to give back and give some of my other brothers in arms a break, and wanted to go in. So in 2004, before I met my significant other, at that time, I had volunteered saying, hey, if there's an opportunity for me to go, I would love to go. And I ended up meeting my wife at the time, Natalie, in 2004 at, later that year. It was like probably October of that year in 2004. And we ended up, getting really close and dating for that next year. And then after about a year of dating, I get the call saying, hey, JR, we need you to go. And, I didn't say no to it. And here I completely forgot about me putting in that request to go and stuff like that. And so there was like, here, I thought everything was going smooth. I'm here with, in Virginia for the next, the rest of my time. And I got a good life. I got a beautiful girl, and everything was going really well. And, I wasn't going to say no because I was committed to what I needed to do, but it was definitely a hard decision. I mean, I couldn't say no.
Could you have said no? Like, would it have been?
No, I mean, it was more order saying you're going type thing.
Yeah.
And I was handpicked by everyone in the DC area out of all the RPs to be able to go. I mean, I was the most qualified, I was the best fit, and I was the most trained than anyone. So that's why they picked me. And I was like, hey, we need you to go. And what happened was on another RP station in California, he got in trouble, I probably with drugs or something like that, and he was not able to deploy, and they needed to replace him as soon as possible with a unit. So I ended up getting this call. It was the end of November 2005, and they said that you need to get out there with 1st Marine Division, and you're going to deploy in January, coming up January 2006. And so they came, packed up all my stuff, moved me out there. I get out there, show up to headquarters, check in, and they have no clue of who I am, where I'm supposed to go, and why I'm even there. So
what country were you in?
No, this is in 1st Marine Division. So this is in Camp Pendleton, California. So okay. I would deploy within one of the battalions within the regiment of 1st Marines. And
did you know where you were going to be deployed to at the time?
I had no clue. I didn't know what unit. All I knew was I was going to go to Iraq. And
you were going to Iraq, okay?
Yeah, but they when I showed up to headquarters, they had no clue where I was even supposed to go. So I ended up standing there in limbo for over a month before they end up putting me with the unit. And the unit that they ended up putting me with was coming back from deployment already from the 31st MU, which is the Marine Expedition Unit. They did pack over in Japan and ended up coming. So my unit, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, ended up coming back at that time. And then once they came back, I ended up doing the rotation, getting with them. And then we did about 3 to 6 months of workups, meaning you're practicing war before you go to war. So going out to sea, going out to the field, doing all this training with each other, and end up deploying on September 13th, 2006. So
September 13th, 2006. So just refresh our audience of what would, and of course, it's been, 15 years from this recording of this interview. Refresh our listeners about the state of affairs in Iraq at that time. What was going on?
Every unit had a different mission of what they needed to do at that time. So, but, in Iraq, without going into too much politics, I'll just kind of talk about what our mission was. Mm-hmm. So when we went over to Iraq, our whole mission was to recruit Iraqi police and train them up and deploy them to be able to perform their job. Because the areas that we were going to, the police and the law enforcement was so corrupt that they were actually doing more crime and bad than they were good. So when we went into the city, and we're part of the 15th MU, and when we went there, so we took a whole regiment of a fleet of ships and things like that. So people from all different places or different units and different jobs, and landed over in Iraq. We took ships over there. So part of 3 different ships: the USS Boxer, Comstock, and the Dubuque. And when we landed over in Kuwait, then we flew out to our destinations where we spread out between our Ramadi, Korean Village, and Barwana and the Haditha area. And I was mainly during in Haditha, but being with the chaplain, usually when we spread out and went to visit with all the Marines, but when we usually came around was when there was something bad, someone got hurt. So what we did was we went in there, we got all the bad police out, we recruited a bunch of Iraqi police, sent them out to training camps, so we would train them, and then we deploy them out there. But that's kind of what our focus was and our mission at that time. And, when it comes to what we were focused on doing in Iraq.
Yeah. Wow. So was anyone getting hurt around you? killed around you? I mean, what was the state of affairs with your unit or other units?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot that went on with a lot of people, and we saw a lot of death, a lot of blood, a lot of injuries, and things that took place. But for me personally, and I'll just speak about a specific event that pretty much changed my life forever, was on February 7th, 2007, I was involved in a suicide bombing. I was staying at a walking checkpoint across, speaking from Christian listeners, if they would know where in the Bible where it talks about the Euphrates River and the Tigris River, where they meet, that was where Father Abraham would walk up and down. And we were right there along the water line on the Euphrates River, where we had a checkpoint where anyone that's walking into the city and out of the city, we would essentially be checking, searching them, and for any type of danger. So we get down there at the walking checkpoint, and I'm mingling with the other Marines. It's just a normal day. It's super sunny outside, and the most perfect day. So it wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold, and it just seemed like the perfect day. Everyone was kind of smiling. You're interacting with the locals as they're coming in, and a lot of the locals were happy to have us there. I mean, when people put this image that they're all bad people, and that's definitely not a fact. I mean, a lot of them are really good people living in a very bad place and just have no way to get out. And so we were interacting with them, and I was standing in an intersection where people would come in and out, and there was like an opening where I can kind of see both sides. And I was there mainly just talking to another Marine. His name was David Emery. He was a corporal at the time, and was there for about 30 minutes or whatnot. And my chaplain was around a corner, where HESCO was. There was a building there that was almost looked like a barn shed where we could go on the top of the roof and we can oversee lookout of what's going on. So a lot of the Marines would stay kind of, if they're taking a break, they were hanging out in the shed area, or in this grass area. There's like a big open grass area inside of there. Think of it probably about 50 by 50 yards inside the space. And I was on this other side of the HESCO. So a HESCO is like this cloth barrier that's blocked in by a wire fence that you fill with dirt. So figure like a big cube, and you stuff it with dirt. And the reason for it is to take the impact of any type of blast that may come, that may happen. And so think of this like very thick cloth stuffed with a bunch of dirt. And it's pretty much makes like a maze, and it blocks off the entry. So if you're going down the highway and you see like those concrete stones that kind of block people going either way or direction, we use these to create different barriers to direct traffic going whichever way that we want them to go. So we have these HESCOs that are separated, and the chaplain is on the other side talking to another Marine. I'm standing here with David Emery, and for whatever reason, after about 30 minutes, I get like this feeling in my gut saying, hey, you need to move. Like, where's the chaplain type at? Really? And it was like I never felt, Christ and the Holy Spirit so strongly into it. And at this time, I didn't even know it was the Holy Spirit. I didn't even know that it was God, but I believe looking back now that it was the Holy Spirit that was speaking to me at this time, because every time I got in the Humvee, it was always terrifying. You just never knew if that was going to be it, because we were fighting a ghost. Most of the time, the people that we were fighting against in Iraq, they're very super intelligent people, but they never wanted to fight us face to face. They use technology. They use IEDs, improvised explosives to help get us, whether it's going to be through grenades or mortars or IEDs to blow up your Humvee, whatever it may be. So every time I got on Humvee, I was always terrified, and I was usually the one driving the chaplain around. And I learned to memorize Psalm 91 while I was over there. And every time I got on the Humvee, that was the one verse that I would speak out and pray over me every single time. And essentially, there's a key part of the verse where it says, 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. And so I remember getting in the Humvee, and I'm driving down there, meeting the chaplain at this checkpoint. Because he was out there doing a patrol with our CO and our sergeant major, and we kind of separated early that morning. And this is probably like around 6 or 7 in the morning. So we kind of separated, but I was meeting him down there with the convoy so that we can kind of get together. And so I was saying that prayer, get down there, and I'm just kind of feeling a little bit off. But I'm talking to the David Emery, and I don't see the chaplain. I know kind of roughly he's around that corner, but like I told you, I get that audible feeling, just kind of that same move. And I didn't respond. I just kind of stood there, and I was like, okay, whatever. And because I'm engaging with the people there, I'm engaging with the locals, I'm talking to David, and then all of a sudden I'm just hearing it again. It's like, hey, you need to move. Go check on the chaplain. And I didn't respond. And I remember it being like 3 times. And then all of a sudden I got so ill in my stomach where I thought I was going to throw up. And I felt like I was completely fine all day. But it was at this moment I was like, hey, you know what? I need to move. It's like, okay, good. I'll go check in the chapel. Why am I feeling like this? I was starting getting a little dizzy, uncomfortable, just nauseous and just feeling really sick. And I remember that feeling, like even today, just kind of be like, man, it just hit me out of nothing. Here I'm 100% fine, doing really well. And then now I can't find the nearest bathroom. It's like, oh man, I just want to throw up and just didn't know what was going on. So I listened and responded, and I ended up going around, walking towards the entry where the people coming into the city. And as I'm walking through there, the sergeant major walks by me, which is sergeant major is the most senior enlisted personnel within our battalion. And he walks by me. I give him the greeting like you're supposed to. So if we walk by someone in senior personnel, it's just good etiquette and respect that you always greet the senior personnel. So I just looked down and said, "Good morning, Sergeant Major." He looks down at me with this very deep voice and just called me RP. And he was like, "RP." And his name was Sergeant Major Joseph Ellis. And he was a big influence in my life at that time and just really led, like when you talk about a Marine's Marine, like he was the exact image of what a Marine was, but he knew how to lead people too. And he was a big important piece to my life and who I was and at that unit and stuff like that. And so he walked by me. I give him a greeting. He looks down at me and calls me RP. As we're walking past, he's ended up standing where David Emery was, and I ended up going a little bit by. And then right when that took place, the guy walking through lifted his arms and blew himself up. He was strapped with C4, had shrapnel all inside of him, and all you do is smell nothing but burnt plastic. And now keep in mind, we didn't know that it was a suicide bomber at this time. I personally thought, and a lot of us thought it was mortars coming over that was trying to attack us from a distance. It wasn't until investigation later that we did it. So the blast took place and I was unconscious. And even speaking right now, it's 14 years later and I still have limited rotation in my right arm without feeling pain 24/7. My right side of my ear, even as I speak, I have nothing but full echo. So just kind of hearing my voice all the time through it. And it just gets worse and worse as the years go on. So, and I definitely.
How far were you thrown?
I don't know if I was thrown unconscious or what, but I was definitely knocked out on the ground for a little bit. And then when I came to it, all I could see was like just nothing but 2 or 3 feet from my left or right. But I saw the chaplain laying there on the ground, and he's trying to crawl underneath the shelter, this barn shelter that I was telling you about. And I see another, I think it was either my first sergeant or my gunny over there waving. I couldn't hear him at all. I mean, all he had was ringing in my ears, my face, my whole right arm. I didn't even know if I was injured, but I just knew I couldn't feel my whole right side of my face. But I ended up grabbing my chaplain by the back of his flak, and I ended up dragging him probably 50 yards to get underneath the shelter. Didn't know what else was coming. Now, put it in perspective, if you ever watch a war movie and you have smoke coming up everywhere, you have helicopters flying in, and if you want to picture what the dust in the Middle East look like, is take a bottle of baby powder, throw it on a desk, and slap your hand in it and see what it does. That's what the dust and the sand is like over in the Middle East. It's not like the sand that you go here in the middle in the U.S. where it's like very fine rock and crystals and stuff like that. But when you touch it, it just gets everywhere. And I say that because as this blast happened, all you do is see smoke everywhere, which is the sand. Helicopters are coming in. You got everyone that's evacuating, getting the medical personnel is getting over all the injured. You have all the other Marines that's going out patrolling the city because, as I said, we thought it was people shooting mortars that were coming in town and or into our area, and we didn't know it was a guy that killed himself at the checkpoint at the time. And it was just the most chaotic thing that you can imagine. I mean, there was blood everywhere. There's body parts everywhere. I was part of the cleanup crew, so I was picking up body arm or someone's arms. I was picking up legs. I was picking up torsos, and I even picked up the guy that killed himself, his head. So I was picking up that, putting it in trash bags, and getting things moving to it going. And it was the biggest bloodbath you could ever imagine. So if you want to picture like a Vietnam War movie or World War II movie and, kind of intensify that by 100, and that's kind of what this was. And to kind of put it in another perspective of it, it's like when the blast happened, the chaplain even had like flesh from other people all over the back of his vest, his clothes and everything like that. I was closer than anyone from the blast, and I had one little speck of blood on the back of my flak. And
wait a minute. Repeat that. You were the closest to the blast?
I was the closest. I was probably the closest person to the blast. I just walked by that checkpoint where the guy was standing that blew himself up. And my sergeant major that I walked by, he ended up standing by David Emery. My sergeant major ended up getting killed. David Emery that I was standing next to, he lost both of his legs. He's still living today, lives out of Pennsylvania with a beautiful family, but he lost both of his legs. He has steel plate inside of his abs to help him sit up and stuff like that. And he's running a woodworking business now, which is phenomenal. We lost another female Marine, Jennifer Purcell, who was sitting back in the corner as she ended up dying. Our interpreter, Jimmy, he ended up dying, and I actually, after I got the chaplain to safety, I went out and helped the medical personnel just because I had some medical training before, with everything I did in combat triage, and was going out there to help some of the medical personnel. And I was with another Marine and a corpsman with Jimmy, and I ended up standing over his head while his eyes glazed back and he took his last breath. And so I was one of the closest ones, but kind of, I want to hit on a couple of two things, but one thing I want to say is when I came back from the deployment and I didn't lose any limbs, I didn't lose anything. Like I was complaining about my arm not being able to raise my rifle, and they would give me muscle relaxers, and I was complaining about my hearing. They didn't really take care of me. And this was a huge pivotal point of why I decided to get out. I didn't get medically separated, but on how bad that I felt like they didn't take care of me, and I just didn't want to be part of that culture anymore. And I don't want to get too deep into that side of things, but a couple things that I wanted to say that was transformational in me as an entrepreneur, but also for people to know from a spiritual standpoint of if they're a believer in Christ, and if they're not a believer in Christ, hearing the story, this should definitely have a little bit more faith. Because when I came back from deployment, my mom was actually at a church gathering. I think it was a big event that was going on at St. Louis Family Church, and they had a guest speaker, and she went up for prayer, and the guest speaker was prophesying over her, and he was saying, like, this is before the event took place for me. So this is probably back in January of 2007, and I got blown up on February 2007. And he was prophesying over my mom, saying, "Hey, is your son over in Iraq at this time, or is he over in combat?" And of course, she said yes. And he was telling her, saying, something really bad is getting ready to happen, but I want you to understand that he's going to be surrounded by 1,000 angels and he's not going to be touched. By that little speck of blood. And the reason why I wanted to say this was because I had one little speck of blood, probably no bigger than a pin spot on the back of my flak, while my chaplain and everyone else had flesh from other people all over their Kevlars, their flaks, their clothes, and everything. And here I am, one of the closest persons to the blast, and yet I had that one little speck of blood, and that was it. And I'm only alive today to share the story because God had surrounded me by his angels, and I believe wholeheartedly. And my mom didn't even know my story until after I came back, when she was the one that told me about that event seminar that she had at church when the guy prophesied over her. So there's that aspect of it, and that definitely renewed my faith. Wow. So whenever I think about where I want to lose my faith or I'm not having trust in God, I'm always reminded about what he pulled me through and where he's taking me, because I believe that he has a purpose for me and a purpose to really serve and encourage and help other people with what I do. And it took me many years to really understand that. And because here I was really angry for a long time because of my limitations in my arm, the echoing in my ear, and just kind of the struggles that I went through, even just mentally and physically with everything that I got going on. But it was about 10 years later, after coming back and thinking about that blast that took place. And this is where it was a turning point for me as an entrepreneur and as a leader of what it takes to actually build leadership, but also understanding of what it takes to build a business. The military is one of the greatest operations and businesses out there. And if you can imitate the systems and structures that they have in place into your own business, there's no reason why you can't be successful. And it took me to really reflect on my event of being blown up on February 7, 2007, that really changed my perspective and my outcome of my life and the way I conduct myself, my core values, and the way I even run my business, the way I lead my team, and everything else. And the reason being is because when that whole blast took place, everyone knew their job, everyone knew their place, everyone knew how to respond and how to react when it happened. That only took place because everyone was trained and ready to go. They were ready to respond from there. They didn't react because just respond out of chaos. I mean, we all knew that when chaos happened, you can either fight or flight. You can either run and hide and duck and get scared, or you're going to react and do what you were trained to do. Well, before you set for deployment, the military trained us for that situation. And in your business, it's not a matter of if you're going to get ambushed or if something bad's going to happen. It's going to be a matter of when. And when I really understood that, and there's three key areas that I really took from the military and really transfer it to me as a leader and running my business. But when you can really take it and understand that you will have some bad things that happen, but identifying all the different threats or identifying the things that could happen into your business, like losing an employee or losing a client or a pandemic and COVID-19 happening, whatever it may be. Are you going to be prepared to respond off of it, or are you going to run and hide? Because you only can do two things. Yeah. You can either fill your ammo box with a lot of ammo and having the tools that you need to be able to turn and fight back down range, or you can not have the ammo, not know what to do, and you can duck and hide and be a coward. So those that don't grow a business successfully, those that struggle in their business, is because they don't have the tools. They don't put in the time. They end up quitting too easy, and they don't do what it takes to actually make it work. But in the military, for us to be able to prepare for that one specific day on February 7th of 2007, we first had to understand a couple of things. One was our mission. Before we went to Iraq, before we stepped feet on the ground, we need to know exactly what we're doing. And it goes back to your identity. What is your identity that you want to do? What is your purpose? What is your mission? What is your why? What are all the potential threats that you're going to overcome? You have to identify all of these different things that we may come, because before we went to war, we went and practiced war. So we had a village set up in the U.S. where it has a city set up. It has actors set up. It has like potential threats where they set up, different IEDs that, isn't harmful for us, but different things for us to look at, and just being exposed to that environment, that type of people before we went to combat. Practicing every scenario that could potentially come our way. So that way, when something did happen, we were able to respond appropriately. So when I look back at the event of me getting blown up and just kind of reflecting on everyone's job of what they did, all the corpsmen, all the senior enlisted personnel, all the Marines that went out and patrolled the city, and everyone taking control of everything that took place there, no one would have been able to do that if we first didn't understand our mission. And the second piece is having that plan. But the plan is first understanding that mission, your why, your purpose, your reason of what you're doing. But then you got to have a plan of what's going to take to be able to practice that. So in my business, if I know my mission is to help, let's just say I'm a fitness coach. If I'm a fitness coach, I want to be able to help people lose 20 pounds over the next 90 days. What is the plan that's going to take to help them get there? If I'm going to run a business and I had the potential threat of one of my best employees end up getting quit, or I have to fire and let them go, am I going to be prepared for that? So you need to identify your different threats. You need to understand your mission, and then you got to create the plan that's going to take. So if any of these things happen, you are going to be able to respond appropriately. Just like it was when we were in combat. When we got blown up and we got ambushed, and that took all that event took place, every single person knew what their job was, what to do, and how to respond appropriately. And it took by understanding our mission. Yeah. It took the time to train for that. And a lot of people want to go through, Joe, from, hey, I want to start a business, to trying to scale without doing the foundational pieces first of it to be able to grow a business. And it took me 10 to 15, 14 years to be able to do that, and 4 businesses later to really understand that, yes, I want to scale because I'm so desperate to get that next paycheck that I just want to jump to there. But reality is, if I put the training, the foundations in place first, that's going to set me up for more success going on later on. So I wanted to kind of put it in perspective too, kind of paint the image a little bit more, is when I was talking about that HESCO, so you can really think about how strong this blast was. We used this HESCO that was like supposed to protect us and take the impact of the blast. That blast was so strong, and ended up killing 3 of our own and injuring many, many others. And even today, I have friends that was part of that blast with me that's still getting shrapnel pulled out of their body. And this is over 15 years from now. We're in 2021, and that happened in 2007. So however many years later. But that HESCO was so strong that a pack of cigarettes, probably from the guy that killed himself, a cigarette was penetrating inside the HESCO almost halfway through, not even a bent to it. That's how strong that impact of that blast that took place. And yet I was maybe 10 feet away from him when it took place, and I'm still here to be able to share the story with you today. And everything that took place from that event has led me to the leader that I am, to the entrepreneur I am, and the success of helping and encouraging and serving my community.
Brother, what a powerful story. Wow. I mean, it's a speechless story. When you bring up the military, it's really remarkable. I've always been fascinated with the military in terms of the organizational strategy, right, of the military. How old were you at the time when the blast?
Well, I went in the military right out of high school, so I was 18. And on that blast of 2007, I think I was 21 at the time.
Okay. So, you got 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, and you've got them performing some pretty detailed and very difficult objectives and tasks. And so, this, I think, is even a challenge for non-military businesses, because, we think that we can't talk to the next generation and get them to do anything. But if the military can figure out ways to get, an 18-year-old to help run a nuclear submarine, right? I think we can get young people on board to help us run our businesses. What would you say to someone who has the attitude that, man, you can't teach these young people anything? What would you say to that person based on your experience in the military?
I personally would hire a high schooler to do certain things for me if as long as they have the drive and they're coachable and willing to learn. And it all starts with you as the entrepreneur and the leader. I mean, you have to take the initiative to want to be ready to lead them, and not just put someone in a place just saying, hey, get out here and run and go do it. But having that plan in place goes back to those three things. And I didn't mention the third thing was execution. But what is your mission? And what's the mission for that person that you want them to come into? What's the plan that you're going to give them and the training that they're going to be able to do? And then execute that plan and that mission that you want to be able to go for. So I'm a believer that all of us, it doesn't matter what age you are, but if they have the skill set and they have the drive and they're willing to learn, that anyone has the capability to do so. I don't care how old they are. They could be young or old, but looking at those young people that has the drive to want to do well, they have just as much ability to be successful as I do.
Yeah, and I think that you hit on a lot of really important points, because it starts with, vision and mission, right? And so you went into the military because you believed in the mission, right? You believed in the mission of the U.S. Marines and, the Navy and then the Marines. You believed in wanting to protect, our nation. You believed in how you knew that you would grow through that. And I think that many entrepreneurs struggle here because they don't really have a clear sense of mission in the organization, one. And if they do, they haven't really communicated it clearly enough for others to say, wow, I share in that purpose. Yes, I want to join the mission. And then secondly, they don't really have a plan. Mm-hmm. And they're not executors either. So most entrepreneurs are, have this model of ready, fire, aim, right? And so, just knowing, just imagine two organizations. One is just like you described. They're mission focused. They have a strong plan. They're able to execute, versus a company in the same industry that's like, we're really nonchalant about our mission. We kind of like are just going by the seat of our pants. We'll see what happens, and maybe we'll get it done. Maybe we won't. I mean, which company would you want to join? It's a rhetorical question, but why not be that kind of entrepreneur that ultimately has those three? And I usually use the terminology, vision, strategy, action, which is very similar to, mission, plan, and execution. Yeah. And so, and another question I have for you regarding the military, because I'm super fascinated with the military structure on organizational structure. Does the word management show up in the military? Do you have managers in the military? Is there designation for the word manager?
It's not. No, the word manager never really comes in play. It's your chain of command, and it's all time, grade, and experience in what they do. So, and the cool thing about the military, it's always that next person, the next rank up is looking out for that next person below, and then the people above them is looking out for everyone else that's below them. So everything is. Everything follows by the chain of command. So if you go in, you're an E1 or you're a PFC and you got a Lance Corporal that's an E3 that's right above you. Well, that Lance Corporal is responsible for those people that's below them. And that PFC is going to be looking to that Lance Corporal before it even goes to the Corporal. And everything just follows suit according to the chain of command.
Mm-hmm. Do they consider each level of chain of command as a level of leadership? Yeah.
So every time you move up in rank, there's different responsibilities in what you do. So, and there's different training that you're going to get as well. So you go from being you can move up to an NCO, so non-commissioned officer. to a staff and CEO and just kind of working your way up from there. But depending on what rank you are, gives you the certain level of responsibility of what you're going to do. So you look at a commanding officer, well, then now they're responsible for the entire battalion, regiment, whatever it may be, where they're the CEO of. So, so it's very important that here's the thing about respect too, and the Marine Corps does it better than every branch of the service, is that rank is respected and honored. So, which is even more so looked at much higher than any other branch of the service. Because when we look at that rank, there's respect for that rank. You're going to honor that rank. You're going to honor that person that's wearing that rank and who they are. And you're counting on them to really protect you and look after you.
Wow. Yeah, that honor. So you were talking about a value system, right? That exists in the Marines that undergirds, the mission, the plan, and the execution. And so when is that value system, and I believe that values are essential to any business because it creates a culture. When are those values shared when you join the Marines or when you join the military?
So when you're talking about values, are you talking about values in regards to morals and ethics and
like are there certain words that are ingrained in you in terms of what your core values are in the Marines?
Yeah, I mean, everything comes down to the core values and who they are and your ethos or whatever it may be. Depending on what branch it is, they all have something that's unique into them. But for the Navy, it's like honor, courage, and even the Marine Corps, it's honor, courage, and commitment. So you got to honor and courage and commitment, but it comes the Corps first, military first, and country and God and family. So there's a lot of core values that you do, but it's all boils down to honor, courage, and commitment.
Which is huge, right? And this is what I'm getting at, right? You've been out of the military for how long?
Since 2007.
Yeah, so we're talking 14 years now, right?
Yeah.
14 years now, and I ask you what the values are, the core values are, and you're able to spit that out in no time flat. How many people today, right now, if I asked you, any of the listeners right now, if I asked you a company you worked for 14 years ago, if you can recite what their core values were, how many people would be able to spit them right out? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to take a wild guess. I'm not a betting man, but I would bet you very few.
Yeah, I agree.
Very few. And so that is another testament, to the power of creating a culture that not only shares and ingrains the core values, but you believe them, right? I mean, tell me, when you hear those core values then and now, do they still matter?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because the name of my company is called Creed Consulting. And when I was thinking about a name for my new consulting business that I do, I wanted to think about the core values that instilled of what I've learned and was trained and ingrained in me from the military and just even through my martial arts days. And the name of Creed is actually our core values. Is an acronym that I created, and military is all about acronyms, and it helps us slow people to remember stuff. So, but anyway, so Creed, as Wikipedia dictionary stands for belief, but also it's an acronym that I created that stands for commitment, resilience, excellence, execution, and discipline. And what I try to instill for my team, myself, and our clients is what is the one thing that you're most committed to, and that you're going to be resilient and push through every single day, giving your best, even through the most difficult times, and having the emotional and physical discipline to complete your mission. And so using Creed as the core values and taking the core values that we did inside of the military and really instilling the same thing inside of my company, it just became ingrained of who I am and what I believe.
I love this. And your team, are your core values a guidepost or a barrier to entry? In other words, hey, look, these are the core values we have. If you buy into them, you believe in them, then you can be a part of this culture. You're a fit for this family. If not, maybe it's just not a fit. Is that the model that you set forth? Yeah.
And if they end up coming on and they don't start resembling our core values, God will push them out in a way, or they'll be pushed out in a way, sees fit. But yeah, they don't last very long.
Yeah. And I think that's important for us as leaders, just to take a moment to reflect on that. Part of our responsibility, I believe, as leaders, are to create an understanding of the mission, of the plan, of how we're going to execute it, and embody that in what we value, what's necessary, the borders, the barriers to how we behave, spoken, right, in terms of our values, and they come from us, right, initially, right? There are personal values that ultimately are ingrained in the organization. And I think we do a disservice to everyone who chooses to follow us if we're not clear on that, one, and two, if we don't follow it ourselves, right, if we're hypocritical, and then three, if we don't enforce it and then say, hey, look, these are who we are, and that's what separates us from everyone else, because you can duplicate all kinds of things in an organization. You can duplicate your pricing, your promotion, you can duplicate your packaging, you can duplicate a lot of things, but you can't duplicate culture. Your culture is like a baby, and it's unique, and it's up to us to develop that culture based on what we believe in our values. So it's the fact that you've I don't know whether you did it consciously or unconsciously based on your experience in the military. I'm sure there's some aspect of a consciousness to it, but I'm sure there's like this, like, okay, I get it. I love that. But that to me is so incredibly beautiful. And honestly, JR, I hope there's an entrepreneur or a professional or a husband or a wife or a father or a mother, somebody that's in leadership, a political leader or a community leader that's listening to this right now and saying, you know what, I've got to own that. I've got to take ownership of these values. I've got to take ownership of how I view and how I share what our mission is, right? With clarity and consistency. I've got to be able to gather my people to create an action plan that's sustainable and ultimately execute, because I think execution is like 90%, right? I mean, 10% on the front end. Okay, we got our mission, we got our plan, but do we make it happen? Because great leaders get things done. And I appreciate that you've shared that.
Yeah.
But that's not all, right? Because you're in the military, you've gotten pretty much blown up, and you originally had this long-term vision to do your 20 years or, just, be tenured and have that. Does that change at this stage? What happens?
Yeah, I mean, without getting into a lot of it, there was a lot of things that went on between other senior personnel that I was stationed with that I didn't really respect the way that they were conducting themselves, and knew that I didn't want to be part of what they were about. And I was like, okay, if they were conducting themselves this way, I want to be bigger and better than them. And
so
granted,
let me ask you this. Do you think that they broke that value system, honor, courage, commitment? Is that? And I don't want to throw names out there, but essentially, it was the chaplain that I was working with at the time, and me and him had a really bad relationship, and it just didn't go really well. I would never neglect like me doing my job and what I was called to do and be able to protect him, which is why I did what I was supposed to do and what I was trained to do on February 7th. When that blast took place. And even at that time, me and him did not have a good relationship. And because of that relationship of me and him, I let that control my outcome of getting out of the military, and which was definitely a young, immature response to it, because I probably would not have been with that unit or ever saw him again if I stayed in whenever I came back. But, at that time, I had enough. I experienced a lot when I was over in Iraq. It just mentally just was done and drained that I didn't want any more of it. So, well, there's a saying that, people don't work for companies, they work for people. Yeah. And so I think that's also, I mean, of course, at the time you had a lot going on, but that really also undergirds the importance of making sure that our people are honoring what our creed is. Yeah. Because once that starts to break within our organization, we could lose great people. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us. Yeah. So you leave the military. So what did you do? Your 4 years? Tell me how long you were in. Yeah, I did 4 years. So we got back from deployment that May 31st, 2007, and I was out by July 10th, 2007. Mm-hmm. And my contract ended that August 10th, 2007. And when I got back from the military, I wanted to go in full-time ministry. I was like, you know what, this is what I want to do. And I learned how to play the guitar at that time. And I was like, I want to go lead worship. And it's kind of funny because when I was in Iraq,
I always joke that I had my rifle in one hand and I had my guitar in the other hand. And that guitar,
nice.
I still have that guitar today, and I've probably taken it out a handful of times since we came back from Iraq, and it still has the Iraqi dust and the oil on the strings and things like that. And it's kind of more of a sentimental thing for it. But that guitar wasn't even just good for me. It was good for morale with the Marines, where I would go to another fob where the Marines are at, meaning there was a house in the middle of a bad city, and it's just a place where we were stationed out of. And I would bring that guitar there, and some of the Marines would just kind of play it and go in the corner and just, have their alone time, just kind of escape. And so that guitar definitely did a lot. But I knew when I came back, I wanted to get in full-time ministry at that time. And so I signed up to go to a Bible college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And here I graduated high school with a 1.2 GPA, and I'm talking about going to college and started doing that. Now, I did start online classes even while I was stationed in Virginia. I mean, for me, it was a maturity thing that I needed to kind of get through and kind of grow through, and something that I wanted to do and for me to be able to do well with it. But when I got out of the military, I went back to St. Louis. I went to St. Louis Christian College, and I did it for one semester, and realizing that, I could pursue music ministry without having a ministry degree. And that's kind of how me and you found each other.
Yeah.
I ended up getting really involved at the church that me and you met at, and playing on the worship team for about 7 years there. And so I did one semester at the Christian college, and realized I wanted to pursue more a business degree. And it was at this time that I even started my first business, all at the same time. Here I'm pursuing college, getting out of the military, trying to adjust as a civilian lifestyle, which I still struggle with today, being a civilian. But then starting my first business, which was a martial arts school. Cause I was like, you know what? I really don't want to work for anyone. And what do I know best? Martial arts. I couldn't compete anymore, which is what I really wanted to do. And I tried, and one day of training would put me out for like a whole week or a month. And just because of the impact of my injuries from getting blown up, it just really put a toll on my body. So I went through a lot of depression even at that time. Just be like, you know what? If I can't compete, then I guess I'll teach. And so that's what forced me into teaching. And it was definitely the start of a beautiful journey. Because at that time, I ended up hiring my first mentor, my first coach, who ended up giving me the skill sets of what I needed. And even the same skill sets that coach taught me in 2007, his name was Mike Metzger, I implemented it in 3 other businesses. And the main things is, how do I do an event? How do I sell to many versus just one at a time, and presenting in front of a crowd and being able to sell a program? And I've been able to do that in multiple different types of businesses, from fitness and martial arts to advertising agency and to even coaching. And that was the start of my entrepreneurial career, was that martial arts school. Did really well with it, and kind of grew that to be pretty successful within a short period of time. And then I ended up walking away from that business and started PowerFit Bootcamp, which was an outdoor group fitness business. And in a very short period of time, that grew to 3 different cities, to more than 20 plus instructors and 3 managers working for me, and did that for 8 solid years. And pretty much only shut it down because me and my wife were going transitions in our life where we had our first kid, and we're moving to Virginia to be close to her family. And I just wanted to kind of take a different step in the journey. And even while I had my boot camp, I was doing really well with it, but I got the opportunity to do some B2B sales, some business to business sales. And I've always tried to find something that can help better me as an entrepreneur and as a person, and my skill set. And when the opportunity came to me, I was like, you know what? I got plenty of time in the day, because with my boot camp, I was teaching morning classes and evening classes, and I had a whole team that was doing it. Could I have done it better? Yes. But I also look back and be like, you know what? If I didn't take this sales opportunity, I would not have seen a whole different world of sales, which completely changed me forever. Because here I knew one way of selling stuff, and now this is a completely different way of selling other types of programs and people skills and communication and everything that came along with it. And spent time in the manufacturing industry and sales for about 7 years. And even during that time, when we moved to Virginia in 2016, I started dabbling with a little bit of business coaching in 2017. Then I started an advertising agency for a community publication. Did that for about 3 years, did extremely well with that. Won free trips, all-inclusive resorts for me and my wife. And built a marketing and advertising agency as well. So I had my coaching business, then I was doing my franchise publication, then I had my advertising agency, and I had my full-time sales job that I was doing all at once. And I was doing that until I was able
Slacker.
You what?
Slacker.
Yeah, I know. It definitely, I look back as like, how the heck did I do it all? And it all boils down to systems. When you can know how to manage your time and you know how to create systems and processes, it doesn't matter how many businesses you have, because you can eventually get them to run without you even being present. And having the right people in place and being able to do it. And that's a whole other discussion, but, it definitely was very fortunate of knowing how to do it, how to sell, how to create those systems and the processes, skill sets that I learned in the military and how to implement, because in the military, there's a system for every system, like everything from how to fold your clothes to where to put it and how to make your bed, everything that you can imagine. So I in 2017, I started dabbling in business coaching, and I even started the advertising agency where I was building sales funnels and marketing things and graphics designing and doing organic teaching for reaching out for lead generation and stuff like that. And then it was 2019 where I realized that, you know what, instead of having the two separate businesses, I want to combine them into one. And that's where Creek Consulting came about, where I was like, you know what, I don't want to be able, the people that I'm teaching on their design and marketing and everything else, I spent more time coaching them on the strategy and the systems that they need to have before we can even implement marketing strategy, that it just made sense to combine it as one. And that was the biggest blessing ever. I ended up shutting down my publication at that time. I ended up being able to quit my full-time job because I was making more money in 1 month or pretty much 1 to 2 months than I did the entire year of that company. And it was like, okay, I think it's time to go. I saved up about 3 to 4 months of income. So that way, if I'd had a slow month, that I was going to be okay for me and my family, and really dialed in and focused on Creek Consulting and been full-time at this since beginning of 2020.
And are you happy you did it?
Oh man, I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah. And I really like the way, you approached it, because you began, building that and then made a transition. A lot of people think they've got to just shut down, working for somebody and then just go right into it. But you actually, again, back to the military, right? You had a plan. Yeah. And so you used the plan to create some security there, of course, because you did have a family. It's different when you're 20 years old, 21 years old, but you had, a spouse, you have kids, you got a lot of responsibility there. And so you're able to then take your business and then do some growth, enough to where, okay, when I totally turn it on, I can say goodbye to this. And I think you definitely made the right move, because you're helping so many people today.
Yeah, it's never about the transaction. It's about serving. I mean, there's so many people that had the desire to hunger and had the skill set to be an entrepreneur, but there's a lot of people that won't give them the opportunity to help them, to lead them to where they need to go. And if you lead with a servant's heart, God's going to bless you. If you lead with a transactional mindset, you're going to fail every single time, because eventually that person that you convince to join your program or buy your product and service is going to see you for who you are and end up leaving you in the first place.
I agree 100%. Yeah, I had a mortgage company years ago. I remember I had a loan officer that would charge like the highest fees he could on every loan. And I'm like, man, you're not going to have any repeat business, because you're not creating, you're not serving others. All you're thinking about is how much can I get paid? And I said, you've got to think of how you can help people solve their problems by serving them. And then you're going to have people that are going to be like, oh, you've got to go see so-and-so. You got to go see so-and-so because he solved my problems. Be a problem solver for others. And then eventually your problems will be solved too. Mm-hmm. That's a philosophy that I think that, especially for some younger entrepreneurs, because younger entrepreneurs that are listening today, they just want to get paid, right? Because you remember what it was like, right? I remember it was like, we want to get paid, and money is important. It's necessary, but it's literally a byproduct of having a system, like you said, that works well for everyone. Right.
100%.
And so you've built those systems, and you continue to, and you build them for others now. Where can people find you?
Yeah, the best place to find me is going to be on Facebook, and just look up my name, J.R. Spear, S, P as in Papa, E-A-R. And I actually have a free gift for every single one of them. So if they go to my Facebook page and they'll see my banner on there, I have a click here button on there. Click that, follow that link. And I actually have a free lead magnet on there that they can download, where it's the 4 proven secrets that I believe every entrepreneur needs to do every single day to build a successful business. And I have a lot of people that training and that guide that I give them has definitely transformed the way that they manage their day and the steps that they need to follow to be able to build their business.
How generous is that? Well, before we wrap up, I'm going to have one wrap up question for you, but I've got to have you back because there's so much more, especially about your business and how you can help people. And so I'd love to invite you back on the show because this was just a warm up, little intro right now, because you have such rich just experience and your heart to serve others. So one day we're going to be on the mountaintop. At the end of the journey, it could be today, it could be in 40 years, could be in 50 years. I don't know how long it's going to be, but we'll be on the great summit. As you're looking down on the great summit of your entire life and you see all of the accolades, all the accomplishments, you see the kids, you see the grandkids, you see everything that you've done, you see the people that you've helped along the way. What is one sentence that you would want to be remembered by?
Yeah, it's not necessarily what I want people to remember me by, but it's what I want my Heavenly Father to remember me by. And it's a good scripture where it says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And I just want to do everything I can that's pleasing to His eyes. And I know a lot of days I fail, but I keep trying to show up every single day to lead my clients, my family, and just and my wife, and just everyone else that's around me.
Wow. Well, I know you're on your way, my friend, and I'm glad to be on that journey with you. I love you, J.R. Spear, my friend, my brother in Christ. So good to have you on the program. I can't wait to have you again. And I just pray blessings for you and your family and everyone you touch.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was definitely a treat for me.
Well, my friend, we did it. I'm so honored you were able to join me on this episode of A Call to Leadership. Now, this might not be for everyone because you really have to be in a certain place in order to take the kind of steps to level up your leadership. And I want you to be taking steps. And for those of you who feel like you're ready for something like this, you can go to our website, greatsummit.com. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. But here's the cool thing that we have. We've got a masterclass. We have all different kinds of events. We even have our leadership club where you can meet other people just like you. You and I will get to spend some time together and really focus on aiming for greatness.